Okay, so, when we last left off... Oh, right. From his position at the point of the Armada, Prince Humperdinck stared up at the cliffs of insanity. This was just like any other hunt. He made himself think away the quarry. It did not matter if you were after an antelope or a bride-to-be. The procedures held. You gathered evidence, then you acted. You studied, then you performed. If you studied too little, the chances were strong that your actions would also be too late. You had to take time. And so, frozen in thought, he continued to stare up the sheer face of the cliffs. Obviously, someone had recently climbed them. There were foot scratchings all the way up a straight line, which meant, most certainly, a rope, an arm-over-arm climb up a 1,000-foot rope with occasional foot kicks for balance. To make such a climb required both strength and planning. So the prince made those marks in his brain. My enemy is strong, my enemy is not impulsive. Now his eyes reached a point perhaps 300 feet from the top. Here it began to get interesting. Now the foot scratchings were deeper, more frequent, and they followed no direct ascending line. Either someone left the rope 300 feet from the top intentionally, which made no sense, or the rope was cut while that someone was still 300 feet from safety. For clearly, this last part of the climb was made up the rock face itself. But who had such talent? And why had he been called to exercise it at such a deadly time, 700 feet above disaster? I must examine the tops of the cliffs of insanity, the prince said, without bothering to turn. From behind him, Count Rugen only said, "Done," and awaited further instructions. Send half the Armada south along the coastline, the other north. They should meet by twilight near the fire swamp. Our ship will sail to the first landing possibility, while you follow me with your soldiers. Ready the whites. Count Rugen signaled the cannoneer, and the prince's instructions boomed along the cliffs. Within minutes, the Armada had begun to split, with only the prince's giant ship sailing alone, closest to the coastline, looking for a landing possibility. There, the prince ordered, some time later, and the ship began maneuvering into the cove for a safe place to anchor. That took time, but not much, because the captain was skilled, and, more than that, the prince was quick to lose patience, and no one dared risk that. Humperdinck jumped from ship to shore. A plank was lowered, and the whites were led to the ground. Of all his accomplishments, none pleased the prince as did these horses. Some day he would have an army of them, but getting the bloodlines perfect was a slow business. He now had 4 whites, and they were identical. Snowy, tireless giants, 20 hands high. On flatland, nothing could catch them, and even on hills and rocky terrain, there was nothing short of Araby close to their equal. The prince, when rushed, rode all 4. Bareback, the only way he ever rode, riding 1, leading 3, changing beasts in mid-stride, so that no single animal had to bear his bulk to the tiring point. Now he mounted and was gone. It took him considerably less than an hour to reach the edge of the cliffs of insanity. He dismounted, went to his knees, commenced his study of the terrain. There had been a rope tied around a giant oak. The bark at the base was broken and scraped, so probably whoever first reached the top untied the rope, and whoever was on the rope at that moment was 300 feet from the peak and somehow survived the climb. A great jumble of footprints caused some trouble. It was hard to ascertain what had gone on. Perhaps a conference, because 2 sets of footprints seemed to lead off while one remained pacing the cliff edge. Then there were 2 on the cliff edge. Humperdinck examined the prints until he was certain of 2 things. 1. A fencing match had taken place. 2. The combatants were both masters. The stride length, the quickness of the foot feints, all clearly revealed to his unfailing eye, made him reassess his second conclusion. They were at least masters. Probably better. Then he closed his eyes and concentrated on smelling out the blood. Surely, in a match of such ferocity, blood must have been spilled. Now it was a matter of giving his entire body over to his sense of smell. The prince had worked at this for many years, ever since a wounded tigress had surprised him from a tree limb while he was tracking her. He had let his eyes follow the blood hunt then, and it had almost killed him. Now he trusted only his olfactories. If there was blood within 100 yards, he would find it. He opened his eyes, moved without hesitation toward a group of large boulders until he found the blood drops. There were few of them, and they were dry, but less than 3 hours old. Humperdinck smiled. When you had the whites under you, 3 hours was a finger snap. He retraced the duel then, for it confused him. It seemed to range from cliff edge and back, then return to the cliff edge, and sometimes the left foot seemed to be leading, sometimes the right, which made no logical sense at all. Clearly, swordsmen were changing hands, but why would a master do that unless his good arm was wounded to the point of uselessness? And that clearly had not happened, because a wound of that depth would have left blood spores, and there was simply not enough blood in the area to indicate that. Strange, strange. Humperdinck continued his wanderings. Stranger still, the battle could not have ended in a death. He knelt by the outline of a body. Clearly, a man had lain unconscious here, but again, no blood. There was a mighty duel, Prince Humperdinck said, directing his comment towards Count Rugen, who had finally caught up, together with a contingent of the 100 mounted men-at-arms. My guess would be, and for a moment the prince paused, following footsteps, would be that whoever fell here ran off there, and he pointed one way, and that whoever was the victor ran off along the mountain path in almost precisely the opposite direction. It is also my opinion that the victor was following the path taken by the princess. Shall we follow them both? The count asked. I think not, Prince Humperdinck replied. Whoever is gone is of minimal importance, since whoever has the princess is the whoever we're after. And because we don't know the nature of the trap we might be getting led into, we need all the arms we have in one band. Clearly, this has been planned by countrymen of Gilder, and nothing must ever be put past them. You think this is a trap, then? The count asked. I always think everything is a trap, until proven otherwise, the prince answered, which is why I'm still alive. And with that, he was back aboard a white and galloping. When he reached the mountain path where the hand fight happened, the prince did not even bother dismounting. Everything that could be seen was quite visible from horseback. Someone has beaten a giant, he said, when the count was close enough. The giant has run away. Do you see? The count, of course, saw nothing but rock and mountain path. I would not think to doubt you. And look there, cried the prince, because now he saw for the first time, in the rubble of the mountain path, the footsteps of a woman. The princess is alive! And again, the whites were thundering across the mountain. When the count caught up with him again, the prince was kneeling over the small body of a hunchback. The count dismounted. Smell this, the prince said, and he handed up a goblet. Nothing, the count said. No odor at all. Aye, O'Kane, the prince replied. I would bet my life on it. I know of nothing else that kills so silently. He stood up then. The princess was still alive. Her footprints followed the path. He shouted at the 100 mountain men. There will be great suffering in Gilder if she dies. On foot now, he ran along the mountain path, following the footsteps that he alone could see. And when those footsteps left the path for wilder terrain, he followed still. Strung out behind them, the count and all the soldiers did their best to keep up. Men stumbled, horses fell, even the count tripped from time to time. Prince Humperdinck never even broke stride. He ran steadily, mechanically, his barrel legs pumping like a metronome. It was 2 hours after dawn when he reached the steep ravine. Odd, he said to the count, who was tiring badly. The count continued only to breathe deeply. 2 bodies fell to the bottom, and they did not come back up. That is odd, the count managed. No, that isn't odd, the prince corrected. Clearly the kidnapper did not come up, because the climb was too steep, and our cannons must have let him know that they were closely pursued. His decision, which I applaud, was to make better time running along the ravine floor. The count waited for the prince to continue. It's just odd that a man who's a master fencer, a defeater of giants, an expert in the use of iocane powder, would not know what this ravine opens into. And what is that? Asked the count. The fire swamp, said the prince. Then we have him, said the count. Precisely so. It was a well-documented trait of his to smile only just before the kill. His smile was very much in evidence now. Wesley, indeed, had not the least idea that he was racing dead into the fire swamp. He knew only, once Buttercup was down at the ravine bottom beside him, that the climb out would take, as Prince Humperdinck had assumed, too much time. Wesley noted only that the ravine bottom was flat rock, and heading in the general direction he wanted to follow. So he and Buttercup fled along, both of them very much aware that gigantic forces were following them and, undoubtedly, cutting into their lead. The ravine grew increasingly sheer as they went along, and Wesley soon realized that whereas once he probably could have helped her through the climb, now there was simply no way of doing so. He had made his choice, and there was no changing possible. Wherever the ravine led was their destination, and that, quite simply, was that. At this point in the story, my wife wants to know that she feels violently cheated, not being allowed the scene of reconciliation on the ravine floor between the lovers. My reply to her, this is me, and I'm not trying to be confusing, but the above paragraph that I'm cutting into now is verbatim Morgenstern. He was continually referring to his wife in the unabridged book, saying that she loved the next section, or she thought that, all in all, the book was extraordinarily brilliant. Miss Morgenstern was rarely anything but supportive to her husband, unlike some wives, I should mention. Sorry about that, Helen. But here's the thing. I got rid of almost all the intrusions when he told us what she thought. I didn't think the device added a whole lot, and, besides, he was always complimenting himself through her, and today we know that hyping something too much does more harm than good, as any defeated political candidate will tell you when he pays his television bills. The thing of it is, I left this particular reference in because, for once, I totally happen to agree with Miss Morgenstern. I think it was unfair not to show the reunion, so I wrote one of my own, what I felt Buttercup and Wesley might have said, but Hero, my editor, felt that made me just as unfair as Morgenstern here. If you're going to abridge a book in the author's own words, you can't go around sticking your own in. That was Hiram's point. And if we really went round and round, arguing over, I guess, a period of a month, in person, through letters, on the phone. Finally, we compromised to this extent. This, what you're reading in the regular type, is strict Morgenstern, verbatim. Cut, yes. Changed, no. But I got Hiram to agree that Harcourt would at least print up my scene. Ballantine has agreed to do the same. It's all of 3 pages, big deal. And if any of you want to see what it came out like, drop a note or a postcard to Urban Del Grey at Ballantine Books, 201 East 50th Street, New York City, and just mention you'd like the reunion scene. Don't forget to include your return address. You'd be stunned at how many people send in for things and don't put their return address down. The publishers agreed to spring for the postage costs, so your total expense is the note or card or whatever. It would really upset me if I turned out to be the only modern American writer who gave the impression that he was with a generous publishing house. They all stink. Sorry about that, Mr. Jovanovich. So let me just add here that the reason they are so generous in paying this giant postage bill is because they fully expect nobody to write in. So please, if you have the least interest at all, or even if you don't, write in for my reunion scene. You don't have to read it, I'm not asking that, but I would love to cost those publishing geniuses a few dollars, because, let's face it, they're not spending much on advertising my books. Let me just repeat the address for you, zip code and all. Urban Del Rey, Ballantine Books, 201 East 50th Street, New York, New York, 10022. And just asked for your copy of the reunion scene. This has gone on longer than I planned, so I'm going to repeat the Morgenstern paragraph I interrupted. It'll read better. Over and out. And now back to the original text. At this point in the story, my wife wants it known that she feels violently cheated, not being allowed the scene of reconciliation on the ravine floor between the lovers. My reply to her is simply this. A. Each of God's beings, from the lowliest on up, is entitled to at least a few moments of genuine privacy. B. What actually was spoken, while moving enough to those involved at the actual time, flattens like toothpaste when transferred to paper for later reading. My dove, my only, bliss, bliss, etc. C. Nothing of importance is in an expository way was related, because every time Buttercup began, "Tell me about yourself," Wesley quickly cut her off with, "Later, beloved, now is not the time." However, it should be noted, in fairness to all, that 1. He did weep, 2. Her eyes did not remain precisely dry, 3. There was more than one embrace, and 4. Both parties admitted that, without any qualifications whatsoever, they were more than a little glad to see each other. Besides, 5. Within a quarter of an hour, they were arguing. It began quite innocently, the two of them kneeling, facing each other, Wesley holding her perfect face in his quick hands. "When I left you," he whispered, "you were already more beautiful than I think I dared to dream. In our years apart, my imaginings did their best to improve on your perfection. At night, your face was forever behind my eyes. And now I see that vision who kept me company in my loneliness was a hag compared to the beauty now before me." "Enough about my beauty," Buttercup said. "Everybody always talks about how beautiful I am. I've got a mind, Wesley. Talk about that." "Throughout eternity, I shall do that very thing," he told her. "But now we haven't time." He made to his feet. The ravine fall had shaken and battered him, but all his bones survived the trick uncracked. He helped her to his feet. "Wesley," Buttercup said then, "just before I started down after you, while I was still up here, I could hear you saying something, but the words were indistinct." I've forgotten whatever it was." "Terrible liar." He smiled at her and kissed her cheek. "It's not important, believe me. The past has a way of being past." "We must not begin with secrets from each other." She meant it. He could tell that. "Trust me," he tried. "I do. So tell me your words, or I shall be given reason not to." Wesley sighed. "What I was trying to get through to you, beloved sweet, what I was, a matter of accurate fact, shouting with everything I had left was, whatever you do, stay up there. Don't come down here. Please." "You didn't want to see me." "Of course I wanted to see you. I just didn't want to see you down here." "Why ever not?" "Because now, my precious, we're more or less kind of trapped. I can't climb out of here and bring you with me without it taking all day. I can get out myself, most likely, without it taking all day. But with the addition of your lovely book, it's not about to happen." "Nonsense! You climbed the cliffs of insanity, and this is nearly that steep." "And it took a little out of me, too, let me tell you. And after that little effort, I tangled with a fellow who knew a little something about fencing. And after that, I spent a few happy moments grappling with a giant. And after that, I had to outfake a Sicilian to death when any mistake meant it was a knife in the throat for you. And after that, I've run my lungs out a couple of hours. And after that, I was pushed 200 feet down a rock ravine. I'm tired, Buttercup. Do you understand tired? I've put in a night, is what I'm trying to get through to you. I'm not stupid, you know. Quit bragging. Quit being rude." When was the last time you read a book? The truth now. And picture books don't count. I mean something with print in it. Buttercup walked away from him. There's other things to read than print, she said, and the Princess of Hammersmith is displeased with you and is thinking seriously of going home. With no more words, she whirled into his arms then, saying, Oh, Wesley, I didn't mean that. I didn't. Not a single syllable of it. Now, Wesley knew that she meant to say not a single syllable of it, because a syllabub was something you ate with cream and wine and mixed them together to form the base. But he also knew an apology when he heard one, so he held her very close and shut his loving eyes and only whispered, I knew it was false, believe me, every single syllabub. And that out of the way, they started running as fast as they could along the flat rock floor of the ravine. Wesley, naturally enough, was considerably ahead of Buttercup, with the realization that they were heading into the fire swamp. Whether it was a touch of sulphur riding a breeze or a flick of yellow flame far ahead in the daylight, he could not say for sure. But once he realized what was about to happen, he began as casually as possible to find a way to avoid it. A quick glance up the sheer ravine sides ruled out any possibility of his getting Buttercup past the climb. He dropped to the ground, as he had been doing every few minutes, to test the speed of their trackers. Now, he guessed them to be less than half an hour behind, and gaining. He rose and ran with her, faster, neither of them spending a breath in conversation. It was only a matter of time before she understood what they were about to be into, so he decided to beat back her panic in any way possible. I think we can slow down a bit now, he told her, slowing down a bit. They're still well behind. Buttercup took a deep breath of relief. Wesley made a show of checking their surroundings. Then he gave her his best smile. With any luck at all, he said, we should be soon safely in the fire swamp. Buttercup heard his speech, of course, but she did not take it well. A few words now on two related subjects. One, fire swamps in general, and two, the Florin Gilder fire swamp in particular. 1. Fire swamps are, of course, entirely misnamed. As to why this has happened, no one knows, though probably the colorful quality of the two words together is enough. Simply, they are swamps which contain a large percentage of sulfur and other gas bubbles that burst continually into flame. They are covered with lush, giant trees that shadow the ground, making the flame burst seem particularly dramatic. Because they are dark, they are almost always quite moist, thereby attracting the standard insect and alligator community that prefers a moist climate. In other words, a fire swamp is just a swamp, period. The rest is embroidery. 2. The Florin Gilder fire swamp did and does have some particular odd characteristics. A. The existence of snow sand, and B. The presence of the ROUS, about which a bit more later. Snow sand is usually, again incorrectly, identified with lightning sand. Nothing could be less accurate. Lightning sand is moist and basically destroys by drowning. Snow sand is as powdery as anything short of talcum, and destroys by suffocation. Most particularly, though, the Florin Gilder fire swamp was used to frighten children. There is not a child in either country that at one time or another was not, when misbehaving very badly, threatened with abandonment in the fire swamp. Do that one more time, you're going to the fire swamp. It's as common as clean your plate. People are starving in China. And so, as children grew, so did the danger of the fire swamp in their enlarging imaginations. No one, of course, ever actually went into the fire swamp, although every year or so a diseased ROUS might wander out to die, and its discovery would only add to the myth and the horror. The largest known fire swamp is, of course, within a day's drive of Perth. It is impenetrable, and over 25 miles square. The one between Florin and Gilder was barely a third that size. No one had been able to discover it, if it was impenetrable or not. Buttercup stared at the fire swamp. As a child, she had once spent an entire nightmare year convinced that she was going to die there. Now she could not move another step. The giant trees blackened the ground ahead of her. From every part came the sun flames. You cannot ask it of me, she said. I must. I once dreamed I would die here. So did I, so did we all. Were you 8 that year? I was. 8? 6? I can't remember. Wesley took her hand. She did not move. Must we? Wesley nodded. Why? Now was not the time. He pulled her gently. She still could not move. Wesley took her in his arms. Child, sweet child, I have a knife. I have my sword. I did not come across the world to lose you now. Buttercup was searching somewhere for a sufficiency of courage. Evidently, she found it in his eyes. At any rate, hand in hand, they moved into the shadows of the fire swamp. Prince Humperdinck just stared. He sat astride a white, studying the footsteps down on the floor of the ravine. There's simply no other conclusion. The kidnapper had dragged his princess into it. Count Rugen sat alongside. Did they actually go in? The prince nodded. Praying the answer would be no, the count asks, do you think we should follow them? The prince shook his head. They'll either live or they die in there. If they die, I have no wish to join them. If they live, I'll greet them on the other side. It's too far around, the count said. Not for my whites. We'll follow as best we can, the count said. He stared again at the fire swamp. He must be very desperate, or very frightened, or very stupid, or very brave. Very all four, I should think, the prince replied. Wesley led the way. Buttercup stayed just behind, and they made, from the outset, very good time. The main thing, she realized, was to forget your childhood dreams, for the fire swamp was bad, but it wasn't that bad. The odor of the escaping gases, which at first seemed almost totally punishing, soon diminished through familiarity. The sunbursts of flame were easily avoided because, just before they struck, there was a deep kind of popping sound clearly coming from the vicinity where the flames would soon appear. Wesley carried his sword in his right hand, his long knife in his left, waiting for the first ROUS, but none appeared. He had cut a very long piece of strong vine and coiled it over one shoulder, and was busy working on it as they moved. What we'll do once I've got this properly done is, he told her, moving steadily on beneath the giant trees, we'll attach ourselves to each other, so that way, no matter what the darkness, we'll be close. Actually, I think that's more precaution than necessary, because, to tell you the truth, I'm almost disappointed. This place is bad, all right, but it's not that bad. Don't you agree? Buttercup wanted to. Totally. And she would have, too. Only by then, the snow sand had her. Wesley turned only in time to see her disappear. Buttercup had simply let her attention wander for a moment. The ground seemed solid enough, and she had no idea what snow sand looked like anyway. But once her front foot began to sink in, she could not pull back. And even before she could scream, she was gone. It was like falling through a cloud. The sand was the finest in the world, and there was no bulk to it whatsoever, and, at first, no unpleasantness. She was just falling, gently, through the soft, powdery mass, falling farther and farther from anything resembling life, but she could not allow herself to panic. Wesley had instructed her on how to behave if this happened, and she followed his words now. She spread her arms and spread her fingers and forced herself into the position resembling that of a dead man's float in swimming. All this because Wesley had told her to, because the more she could spread herself, the slower she would sink. And the slower she sank, the quicker he could dive down after her and catch her. Buttercup's ears were now caked with snow sand all the way in, and her nose was filled with snow sand, both nostrils, and she knew as she opened her eyes a million tiny, fine bits of snow sand would keep behind her eyelids, and now she was beginning to panic badly. How long had she been falling? Hours, it seemed, and she was having pain in holding her breath. You must hold it till I find you, he had said. You must go into a dead man's float, and you must close your eyes and hold your breath, and I'll come get you, and we'll both have a wonderful story for our grandchildren. Buttercup continued to sink. The weight of the sand began to brutalize her shoulders. The small of her back began to ache. It was agony keeping her arms outstretched and her fingers spread when it was all so useless. The snow sand was heavier and heavier on her now as she sank always down. And it was bottomless, as they thought when they were children. Did you just sink forever until the sand ate away at you, and then did your poor bones continue the trip forever down? No, surely there had to be somewhere be a resting place. A resting place, Buttercup thought. What a wonderful thing. I'm so tired, I want to rest. And, Wesley, come save me, she screamed. Or it started to, because in order to scream, you had to open your mouth. So all she really got was the first sound of the first word. Whoa! After that, the snow sand was down into her throat, and she was done. Wesley had made a terrific start. Before she had even entirely disappeared, he dropped his sword and long knife and gotten the vine coil from his shoulder. It took him next to no time to knot one end around a giant tree, and, holding tight to the free end, he simply dove headlong into the snow sand, kicking his feet as he sank, for greater speed. There was no question in his mind of failure. He knew he would find her, and he knew she would be upset and hysterical, and possibly even brain-tumbled, but alive. And that was, in the end, the only fact of lasting import. The snow sand had his ears and nose blocked, and he hoped she had not panicked and had remembered to spread eagle her body so that he could catch her quickly with his headlong dive. If she remembered, it wouldn't be that hard. The same really as rescuing a drowning swimmer in murky water. They floated slowly down. You dove straight down, you kicked, you pulled with your free arm, you gained on them, you grabbed them, you brought them to the surface, and the only real problem then would be convincing your grandchildren that such a thing had actually happened, and was not just another family fable. He was still concerning his mind with the infants yet unborn when something happened he had not counted on. The vine was not long enough. He hung suspended for a moment, holding on to the end of it as it stretched straight up through the snow sand to the security of the giant tree. To release the vine was truly madness. There was no possibility of forcing your body all the way back up to the surface. A few feet of ascension was possible if you kicked wildly, but no more. So if he let go of the vine, and did not find her within a finger snap, it was all up for both of them. Wesley let go of the vine without a qualm, because he had come too far to fail now. Failure was not even a problem to be considered. Down he sank then, and within a finger snap he had his hand around her wrist. Wesley screamed then himself, in horror and surprise, and the snow sand gouged his throat, for what he had grabbed was a skeleton wrist, bone only, no flesh left at all. That happened in the snow sand. Once the skeleton was picked clean, it would begin often to float, like seaweed in a quiet tide, shifting this way and that, sometimes surfacing, more than just journeying through the snow sand for eternity. Wesley threw the wrist away and reached out blindly with both hands now, scrabbling wildly to touch some part of her, because failure was not a problem. Failure is not a problem, he told himself. It is not a problem to be considered, so forget failure. Just keep busy and find her. And he found her. Her foot, more precisely, and he pulled it to him, and then his arm was around her perfect waist. And he began to kick with any strength left, needing now to rise a few yards to the end of the vine. The idea that it might be difficult finding a single vine strand in a small sea of snow sand never bothered him. Failure was not a problem. He would simply have to kick, and when he had kicked hard enough, he would rise, and when he had risen enough, he would reach out for the vine, and when he reached out, it would be there, and when it was there, he would tie her to it, and with his last breath, he would pull them both up to life. Which is exactly what happened. She remained unconscious for a very long time. Wesley busied himself as best he could, cleansing the snow sand from ears and nose and mouth and, most delicate of all, from beneath the lids of her eyes. The length of her quietness disturbed him vaguely. It was almost as if she knew she had died and was afraid to find out for a fact that it was true. He held her in his arms, rocked her slowly. Eventually she was blinking. For a time she looked round and round. "We live, then?" she managed finally. "We're a hardy breed." What a wonderful surprise! No need, he was going to say. No need for worry. But her panic struck too quickly. It was a normal enough reaction, and he did not try to block it, but rather held her firmly and let the hysteria run its course. She shuddered for a time, as if she fully intended to fly apart. But that was the worst. From there it was but a few minutes of quiet sobbing. Then she was Buttercup again. Wesley stood, buckled on his sword, replaced his long knife. "Come," he said. "We have far to go." "Not until you tell me," she replied. "Why must we endure this?" "Now is not the time." Wesley held out his hand. "It is the time." She stared where she was, on the ground. Wesley sighed. She meant it. "All right," he said, finally. "I'll explain, but we must keep moving." Buttercup waited. "We must get through the fire swamp," Wesley began, "for one good and simple reason." Once he had started talking, Buttercup stood, following close behind him as he went on. "I had always intended getting to the far side. I had not, I must admit, expected to go through. Around was my intention, but the ravine forced me to change." The good and simple reason," Buttercup prompted. "On the far end of the fire swamp is the mouth of Giant Eel Bay, and anchored far out in the deepest waters of that bay is the great ship Revenge. The Revenge is the sole property of the dread pirate Roberts." "The man who killed you," Buttercup said. "That man? The one who broke my heart? The dread pirate Roberts took your life. That was the story I was told." "Quite correct," Wesley said. "And that ship is our destination." "You know the dread pirate Roberts? You are friendly with such a man?" "It's a little more than that," Wesley said. "I don't expect you to quite grasp this all at once. Just believe it's true. You see, I am the dread pirate Roberts." "I fail to see how that is possible, since he has been marauding for 20 years and you only left me 3 years ago." "I myself am often surprised at life's little quirks," Wesley admitted. "Did he, in fact, capture you when you were sailing for the Carolinas?" "He did. His ship Revenge captured the ships I was on, the Queen's Pride, and we were all to be put to death." "But Roberts did not kill you." "Clearly. Why?" "I cannot say for sure, but I think it is because I asked him please not to. The please, I suspect, aroused his interest. I didn't beg or offer bribery, as the others were doing. At any rate, he held off with the sword long enough to ask, 'And why should I make an exception of you?' And I explained my mission, how I had to get to America to get money to reunite with the most beautiful woman ever reared by man, namely you." "I doubt that she is as beautiful as you imagine," he said, and he raised the sword again. "Hair the color of autumn," I said, "and skin like wintry cream." "Wintry cream, eh?" he said. He was interested now, at least a bit, so we went on describing the rest of you. And at the end, I knew I had him convinced of the truth of my affection for you.
"I'll tell you, Wesley," he said then. "I feel genuinely sorry about this, but if I make an exception in your case, news will get out that the dread pirate Roberts has gone soft, and that will mark the beginning of my downfall. For once they stop fearing you, piracy becomes nothing but work, work, work all the time, and I am far too old for such a life." "I swear I will never tell, not even my beloved," I said. "And if you will let me live, I will be your personal valet and slave for 5 full years. And if I ever once complain or cause you anger, you may chop my head off then and there, and I will die with praise for your fairness on my lips." I knew I had him thinking. "Go below," he said. "I'll most likely kill you tomorrow." Wesley stopped talking for a moment and pretended to clear his throat, because he had spotted the first ROUS following behind them. There seemed to be no need yet to alert her, so he just continued to clear his throat and hurry along between the flame bursts. "What happened tomorrow?" Buttercup urged. "Go on." "Well, you know what an industrious fellow I am. You remember how I liked to learn and how I'd already trained myself to work 20 hours a day. I decided to learn what I could about piracy in the time left allotted me, since it would at least keep my mind off my coming slaughter. So I helped the cook, and I cleaned the hold, and, in general, did whatever was asked of me, hoping that my energies might be favorably noted by the dread pirate Roberts himself. "Well, I've come to kill you," he said the next morning, and I said, "Thank you for the extra time. It's been most fascinating. I've learned such a great deal." And he said, "Overnight? What could you learn in that time?" And I said, "That no one has ever explained to your cook the difference between table salt and cayenne pepper." "Things have been a bit fiery this trip," he admitted. "Go on. What else?" And I explained that there would have been more room in the hold if boxes had been stacked differently, and he noticed that I had completely reorganized things down there, and, fortunately for me, there was more room. And finally he said, "Very well, you can be my valet for a day. I've never had a valet before. Probably I won't like it, so I'll kill you in the morning." Every night for the next year he always said something like that to me. "Thank you for everything, Wesley. Good night now. I'll probably kill you in the morning." By the end of that year, of course, we were more than valet and master. He was a pudgy little man, not at all fierce, as you would expect the dread pirate Roberts to be, and I like to think he was as fond of me as I of him. By then, I had learned really quite a great deal about sailing and hand fighting and fencing and throwing the long knife, and had never been in as excellent physical condition. At the end of 1 year, my captain said to me, "Enough of this valet business, Wesley. From now on you are my second in command." And I said, "Thank you, sir, but I could never be a pirate." And he said, "You want to get back to that autumn-haired creature of yours, don't you?" I didn't even have to bother answering that. "A good year or two of piracy, and you'll be rich, and back you go." And I said, "Your men have been with you for years, and they aren't rich." And he said, "That's because they are not the captain. I'm going to retire soon, Wesley, and the revenge will be yours." I must admit, beloved, I weakened a bit there, but we reached no final decision. Instead, he agreed to let me assist him in the next few captures and see how I liked it, which I did. There was now another ROUS following them, flanking them as they moved. Buttercup saw them now. "Wesley, shh, it's all right. I'm watching them. Shall they finish? Will it take your mind off them?" "You helped him with the next few captures," Buttercup said. "Just see if you liked it." Wesley dodged. A sudden burst of flame shielded Buttercup from the heat. Not only did I like it, but it turned out I was talented as well. So talented that Robert said to me one April morning, "Wesley, the next ship is yours. Let's see how you do." That afternoon we spotted a fat Spanish beauty, loaded for Madrid. I settled close. They were in a panic. "Who is it?" their captain cried. "Wesley," I told them. "Never heard of you," they answered, and with that they opened fire. Disaster. They had no fear of me at all. I was so flustered I did everything wrong, and soon they got away. I was, do I have to add, disheartened. Roberts called me to his captain. I slunk in like a whipped boy. "Buck up," he told me, and then he closed the door, and we were quiet alone. "What I am about to tell you, I have never said before, and you must guard it closely." I, of course, said I would. "I am not the dread pirate Roberts," he said. "My name is Ryan. I inherited this ship from the previous dread pirate Roberts, just as you will inherit from me. The man I inherited from was not the real dread pirate Roberts either. His name was Cummerbund. The real original dread pirate Roberts has been retired 15 years and has been living like a king in Patagonia." I confessed my confusion. "It's really very simple," Ryan explained. "After several years, the original Roberts was so rich he wanted to retire. Clooney was his friend and his first mate, so he gave the ship to Clooney, who had an identical experience to yours. The first ship he attempted to board nearly blew him out of the water. So Roberts, realizing the name was the thing that inspired the necessary fear, sailed the Revenge to port, changed course entirely, and Clooney told everyone that he was the dread pirate Roberts. And who was to know he was not? When Clooney retired rich, he passed the name to Cummerbund to me, and I, Felix Raymond Ryan, of Brudel, outside Liverpool, now dubbed the Wesley the Dread Pirate Roberts. All we need is to land, take on some young new pirates, and I will sail along for a few days as Ryan, your first mate, and I will tell everyone about my years with you, the dread pirate Roberts. Then you will let me off when they are all believers, and the waters of the world are yours." Wesley smiled at Buttercup. "So now you know. And you should also realize why it is foolish to be afraid. But I am afraid. It will all be happy at the end. Consider, a little over 3 years ago, you were a milkmaid and I was a farm boy. Now you are almost a queen, and I rule uncontested on the water. Surely such individuals were never intended to die in a fire swamp." "How can you be sure?" "Well, because we're together, hand in hand, in love." "Oh yes," Buttercup said, "I keep forgetting that." Both her words and her tone were a trifle standoffish, something Wesley surely would have noticed had not an ROUS attacked him from the tree branch, sinking its giant teeth into his unprotected shoulder, forcing him to earth in a very unexpected spurt of blood. The other two that had been following launched their attack then too, ignoring Buttercup, driving forward with all their hungry strength to Wesley's bleeding shoulder. Any dissection of the ROUS, rodents of unusual size, must begin with the South American capybara, which has been known to reach a weight of 150 pounds. They are nothing but water hogs, however, and present very little danger. The largest pure rat is probably the Tasmanian, which has actually been weighed at 100 pounds. But they have little agility, tending to sloth when they reach full growth, and most Tasmanian herdsmen have learned with ease to avoid them. The fire swamp ROUSs were a pure rat strain, weighed usually 80 pounds, and had the speed of wolfhounds. They were also carnivorous and capable of frenzy. The rats struggled with each other to reach Wesley's wound. Their enormous front teeth tore at the unprotected flesh of his left shoulder, and he had no idea if Buttercup was already half devoured. He only knew that if he didn't do something desperate right there, she soon would be. So, he intentionally rolled his body into a spurt of flame. His clothes began to burn, that he expected. But more important, the rats shied away from the heat and the flames for just an instant, but that was long enough for him to reach and throw his long knife into the heart of the nearest beast. The other two turned instantly on their own kind and began eating it while it was still screaming. Wesley had his sword by then, and with 2 quick thrusts, the trio of rats was disposed of. "Hurry!" he shouted to Buttercup, who stood frozen where she had been when the first rat landed. "Bandages! Bandages!" Wesley cried. "Make me some bandages, or we die!" And with that, he rolled onto the ground, tore off his burning clothes, and set to work caking mud onto the deep wound in his shoulder. "They were sharks! Blood creatures! It's blood they thrive on!" He smeared more and more mud into his wound. "We must stop my bleeding, and we must cover the wound so that they do not smell it. If they don't smell the blood, we'll survive. If they do, we're for it, so help me, please!" Buttercup ripped her clothes into patches and ties, and they worked at the wound, caking the blood with the mud from the floor of the fire swamp, then bandaging and rebandaging over it. "We'll know soon enough," Wesley said, because 2 more rats were watching them. Wesley stood, hand in hand. "If they charge, if they smell it," he whispered. The giant rats stood watching. "Come," Wesley whispered. 2 more giant rats joined the first pair. Without warning, Wesley's sword flashed, and the nearest rat was bleeding. The other 3 contented themselves with that for a while. Wesley took Buttercup's hand, and again they started to move. "How bad are you?" she said. I'm in something close to agony, but we can talk about that later. Hurry now." They hurried. They had been in the fire swamp for 1 hour, and it turned out to be the easiest one they had had of the 6 it took to cross it. But they crossed it, alive and together, hand very much in hand. It was nearly dusk when they at last saw the great ship Revenge far out in the deepest part of the bay. Wesley, still within the confines of the fire swamp, sank beaten to his knees. For between him and his ship were more than a few inconveniences. From the north sailed in half the great armada, from the south now the other half. 100 mounted horsemen, armored and armed, in front of them the count, and out alone in front of all, the 4 whites with the prince astride the leader. Wesley stood. "We took too long a crossing. The fault is mine." "I accept your surrender," the prince said. And there is probably the best place to end off the reading for tonight. Thank you for listening. We'll do this again tomorrow.